breaking from Ford. It's fascinating. Philip O joins us with the latest. Phil.
Ford swore their engines would outlast anything on the road. Now an $888 million scandal says otherwise. Thousands of owners are hearing the same ticking sound under the hood. It isn't normal wear. It's the countdown to catastrophic failure. Families are stranded, savings are drained, and Ford's silence is louder than any commercial they've ever aired. So why did engineers warn about this years ago? Why were the defects buried behind service bulletins? And why did the breakdowns happen just past the warranty limit? What's happening? The numbers alone should have frozen America in its tracks. $888 million. That is not a simple payout. That is not an accounting mistake. That is a figure so large it shatters confidence and makes loyal owners question everything they thought they knew about Ford. For generations, Ford's trucks have been more than machines. They have been icons of reliability, symbols of durability, promises that a family's investment would carry them through storms, through long workdays, through cross-country drives. Yet the announcement of an $888 million scandal tied to catastrophic engine failures pulled back the curtain on a truth that felt like betrayal. It was not just the staggering size of the scandal that made headlines, it was what the number implied. A company does not set aside nearly $1 billion unless the damage reaches deep into its core operations. That figure represented more than faulty machinery. It represented a breach of trust, a silent acknowledgement that something had gone terribly wrong inside America's Blue Oval brand. For owners who had proudly written checks for trucks costing more than $60,000, the scandal turned pride into suspicion. But numbers are abstract until they crash into reality, and for drivers across the country, the scandal became personal in the most terrifying ways imaginable. The betrayal first appeared not in balance sheets or headlines, but in the sickening sound that signaled a nightmare on the open road. The tick you can hear. It begins as a faint sound, almost dismissible, a gentle tick under the hood, a rhythm out of sync with the steady hum of a healthy engine. Owners described it like the ticking of a clock, counting down to disaster. Families on highways, workers towing heavy loads, and parents idling in school pickup lines all began to notice the same haunting pattern. Engines did not simply age, they failed, suddenly, violently, without warning. Imagine a family traveling at 65 miles per hour, children in the backseat. When the V8 engine seizes, steering stiffens, brakes lose bite, the power that once symbolized safety collapses into silence. Behind them, traffic barrels forward. Ahead of them, control is gone. The terror is immediate and unforgettable. These were not accidents caused by reckless driving or poor maintenance. These were failures built into the very DNA of engines drivers had trusted with their lives. In neighborhoods across America, conversations shifted from pride to fear. Owners who once bragged about torque and towing capacity now whispered about ticking noises and sudden stalls. A driveway once lit by pride and ownership became a place of quiet dread. Every start of the ignition carried the same question: would today be the day it fails? Behind every tick and every roadside breakdown lay deeper answers, hidden in blueprints, specifications, and choices made in conference rooms far from the roar of highways. If you're shocked by what you've heard so far, drop a comment with your thoughts and hit subscribe and show this truth cannot stay buried. Blueprint of failure. The truth of the scandal was etched not in chance, but in design. Engineers had flagged the vulnerabilities years earlier. Ultra-thin oil specifications were chosen in pursuit of better fuel economy. But they offered little margin for real-world stress. Microscopic tolerances left no room for error when heat and friction rose under heavy loads. Metallurgical inconsistencies in bearings and lifters created fault lines that could not be seen but were destined to be felt. Each decision seemed small on its own. Together, they formed a blueprint for failure. What looked efficient in controlled laboratory conditions collapsed under daily reality. Highways are not sterile test cells. They bring brutal heat, unpredictable stop-and-go traffic, and long hauls that stretch every component to its limit. Under those conditions, oil thinned like water, bearings wore prematurely, and lifters collapsed without warning. Engines that were supposed to last 200,000 miles instead began failing with fewer than 30,000. This was not about a single defective part. It was about a philosophy that prioritized compliance and marketing numbers over long-term reliability. In chasing efficiency metrics and production targets, the design left ordinary drivers carrying risks they never agreed to shoulder. Yet when the failures grew impossible to ignore, Ford did not confess, innovate, or protect its customers. Instead, It reached for the oldest corporate weapon of all, denial, the playbook of denial. When owners arrived at dealerships with seized engines and frightening stories, they expected answers. Instead, they met a carefully practiced script. Service managers spoke of isolated incidents. Customer hotlines hinted at poor maintenance. Warranty representatives asked for exhaustive paperwork, knowing most drivers would not have every oil change receipt neatly documented. The narrative was clear: blame the driver, not the design. Ford's communications were crafted not to solve the problem, but to contain it. Dealers were quietly instructed to frame issues as rare anomalies. Internal service bulletins circulated with diagnostic routines designed to cast doubt on claims. Marketing campaigns rolled on, showcasing trucks conquering rugged terrain with reliability slogans that now sounded hollow. The brand that had built its empire on trust chose spin over transparency. For owners, the insult added to injury. Families stranded on highways now faced battles in service bays. Mechanics spoke in vague reassurances, while executives spoke in silence. The more Ford denied the pattern, the louder the evidence became. Each stalled truck, each ticking engine, each family forced to the roadside became another piece of proof that denial had replaced responsibility. Denial could delay accountability, but it could not erase what was already happening. Soon, complaints would leap from whispers in forums to formal charges in courtrooms, from forums to federal court. It started small, almost invisible, tucked away in obscure corners of the internet. Owners posted in automotive forums about strange ticks, unexplained engine stalls, and catastrophic failures at shockingly low mileage. At first, the stories looked like outliers. Every brand has lemons, and every mechanic has seen engines fail for countless reasons. But as weeks turned to months, patterns began to form. The failures were not random. They clustered around the same models, the same V8 engines, and the same early warning signs. Mechanics confirmed what owners already suspected. The problem was systemic. Independent repair shops began documenting lifter collapses, bearing wear, and oil starvation in trucks with fewer than 30,000 miles. Dealership insiders leaked service bulletins that hinted at known weaknesses. Slowly, what began as whispers online grew into a roar that could not be ignored. The shift from forums to legal filings was inevitable. The first lawsuits landed in state courts, driven by frustrated owners facing five-figure repair bills. Then came whistleblowers, engineers and contractors who claimed Ford had known about the issues years earlier. Their statements added weight to claims of concealment. Lawyers connected the dots, drawing on complaint databases and technical evidence. A trickle of cases became a surge. By the time federal judges considered consolidation, the story had escaped the internet and entered the courts, dragging Ford into the legal spotlight it had tried to avoid. If the courtroom revealed betrayal in documents, the driveway revealed betrayal in dollars, costs families never expected to carry. Dipstick economics. For most families, the scandal was not just about engines, it was about budgets. A truck purchased for $60,000 was supposed to represent peace of mind, not financial strain, yet the failures carried real costs that rippled through households. Repair bills for seized engines climbed to more than $15,000, often wiping out savings in a single blow. For small business owners relying on their trucks for income, downtime meant lost contracts, missed work, and strained cash flow. Fuel economy dropped as thicker oil was mandated, shaving 2 or 3 miles per gallon from real-world performance. That translated into hundreds of extra dollars each month at the pump for high-mileage drivers. Over a 5-year period, the added fuel cost alone could reach more than $10,000, money no owner had budgeted when signing purchase papers. Insurance premiums crept higher as actuaries flagged higher risk profiles. Some policies excluded coverage for known defects, leaving owners even more exposed. Resale values collapsed almost overnight. Trucks flagged with the oil cap modification or service records tied to engine complaints lost thousands in market value. For families counting on trade-in equity to roll into their next purchase, the hit felt like betrayal twice over. They had already paid in repairs, fuel, and stress. Now they were told the vehicle itself was worth less, simply because Ford failed to deliver what it promised. Yet perhaps the cruelest blow came not in costs already paid, but in the timing of failure, perfectly aligned with the fine print of warranties. The warranty window. Every warranty has a limit, and every automaker knows where that clock ticks down. For Ford's V8 scandal, the failures arrived with eerie precision, just beyond the window where the company was still responsible. Engines often collapsed between 58,000 and 65,000 miles, leaving owners just outside coverage. The timing raised suspicions among drivers and attorneys alike. Was this coincidence or a calculated gamble? Internal memos later revealed the thinking behind warranty arithmetic. A full redesign would have cost billions. A cheaper mitigation, thicker oil, and adjusted service instructions could push many engines just far enough to limp past 5 years or 60,000 miles. Once the warranty expired, responsibility shifted entirely to the customer. For accountants, this was cold efficiency. For families, it was devastating. Owners who had diligently followed service schedules were still told their failures fell outside coverage. The warranty system designed to protect buyers became a wall to block them. Appeals dragged on for months, demanding meticulous maintenance records few households ever kept. Every missing receipt, every unexplained gap became grounds for denial. In practice, the system did not shield customers from defects. It shielded Ford from liability. The bitterness was sharp. People who had trusted the blue oval discovered that the fine print had been weaponized against them. They were not just victims of a defective engine, they were victims of a strategy. And when thousands of similar stories aligned, what was once an individual tragedy became a collective force too powerful to ignore. Aggregation. One becomes thousands. The power of one complaint can be dismissed. The power of thousands cannot. As failures multiplied, attorneys pursued class action suits that gathered owners into unified groups. What had been scattered? Frustrated voices became a single legal chorus. The courtroom no longer echoed with isolated grievances, but with collective outrage backed by evidence. Discovery unearthed service bulletins, internal emails, and testing data that confirmed what owners long suspected. Engineers had raised concerns, managers had calculated costs, decisions had been made to contain, rather than resolve, the defect. For judges and juries, the documents told a story as clearly as any witness could. The lawsuits no longer asked whether defects existed. They asked how long the company had known and why nothing was done. With each filing, the pressure grew. Consolidated cases attracted national attention. Regulatory agencies monitored the outcomes, while investors watched nervously. Ford's defenses, that these were rare events or maintenance issues, collapsed under the weight of thousands of consistent accounts. Each plaintiff was another brick in a wall of accountability. Class actions shifted the balance of power. A single owner could be silenced, delayed, or denied. Thousands could not. What began as a lone driver stranded on a highway became a movement with legal teeth, a storm gathering force in courts across the nation. And yet, the louder that storm grew, the more outside forces, from regulators to rivals, prepared to turn pressure into consequences. The regulator's clock. When complaints turned into crashes and lawsuits multiplied, the eyes of Washington turned toward Ford. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration had seen scandals before, but the scope of sudden V8 failures made this case impossible to ignore. Regulators opened a preliminary evaluation after receiving dozens of detailed reports from owners who described engines seizing at highway speeds. Each report was another warning bell, and soon those bells began to sound like an alarm. The investigation moved quickly. Field inspectors visited repair shops, tore down failed engines, and compared notes with whistleblowers. They discovered wear patterns so consistent they could not be dismissed as coincidence. Memos circulated in the agency describing unreasonable risk of crash, a phrase that carries enormous legal weight. Pressure grew not only from data, but from politics, as lawmakers demanded action on behalf of constituents who feared the vehicles in their driveways. Every passing week tightened the regulatory clock. Once the probe expanded into an engineering analysis, Ford could no longer spin the narrative. Regulators wanted hard answers about design flaws, testing protocols, and disclosure timelines. The longer Ford resisted, the worse the optics became. By spring, hearings were already being discussed in congressional corridors. While Washington sharpened its knives, Detroit's rivals saw an opportunity too tempting to ignore, an open lane to seize Ford's crown. Conquest season. The pickup truck market is America's fiercest battlefield, and weakness is blood in the water. As Ford stumbled under the weight of investigations, rivals wasted no time in pouncing. Chevrolet dealers rolled out conquest offers, promising cash to any owner willing to trade a stricken Ford for a Silverado. Ram placed glossy ads emphasizing durability, drawing a sharp contrast to Ford's silence. Toyota doubled down on reliability, pairing promotions with their long reputation for dependability. The timing was strategic. Billboards sprouted across the Midwest and South, where brand loyalty runs deepest. Commercials showed families pulling trailers, not with Fords, but with rivals who promised peace of mind. dealers hosted community events and barbecues, inviting disgruntled Ford owners to experience alternatives firsthand. Each gesture whispered the same message: trust us, not them. Electric truck makers joined the feeding frenzy. Startups and established EV brands presented themselves as the future, untainted by the failures of the past. They framed Ford's scandal as proof that old engines were relics, ready to be replaced by silent, battery-powered reliability. For decades, Ford's dominance in trucks had seemed unshakable, yet with every conquest campaign and every trade-in incentive, that dominance weakened. Customers who switched brands rarely returned, making each lost household a permanent wound. And while competitors smiled on billboards, Ford's own dealers bore the brunt of betrayal, facing chaos on showroom floors. We're only scratching the surface, and the fallout keeps growing. Subscribe now, so you never miss the next revelation. Together, we'll uncover what they desperately hoped would remain hidden: the stigma spiral. At the local level, the scandal hit hardest. Dealerships, once the proud faces of the Ford brand, found themselves in crisis. Service bays filled with angry customers demanding answers. Yet mechanics had little more than corporate bulletins instructing them to pour thicker oil and send drivers back on the road. Sales floors froze under stop-sale orders, leaving trucks stranded on lots. Families who had put down deposits demanded refunds, while others walked out, vowing never to return. Resale values collapsed further. Used car managers reported buyers walking away from perfectly clean trucks simply because they carried the wrong badge. Online listings for affected V8 models attracted lowball offers, and even generous discounts failed to restore confidence. The vehicles had become toxic assets, visible reminders of Ford's broken promises. Trust, once measured in generations, began to dissolve. Communities where Ford trucks had been fixtures, work sites, farms, suburban neighborhoods, now buzzed with doubt. A neighbor's breakdown became everyone's cautionary tale. Owners no longer bragged about horsepower or towing capacity. They defended themselves from suspicion, insisting their truck was not one of the bad ones. The spiral deepened with each headline and every viral video of a stranded Ford. Stigma spread faster than any corporate statement could contain, dragging the brand's reputation into freefall. Inside Ford's headquarters, the public storm was matched by a quieter, more painful reckoning. Engineers and employees questioning the very culture that had led them here. Inside the glass house, behind the mirrored windows of Ford's headquarters, the mood shifted from confidence to crisis. Engineers who had once taken pride in designing America's workhorse now felt a sting of shame. Some admitted privately that warnings about lubrication flaws and lifter durability had been raised years earlier, only to be pushed aside in the name of cost savings and fuel economy targets. Each new lawsuit felt like confirmation of what they had feared all along, that they had been ignored. Morale suffered across engineering teams. Younger recruits, once eager to work on iconic trucks, now questioned their career paths. Senior talent quietly left for rivals or startups where innovation did not carry the same stigma. For those who remained, conversations in hallways carried a new bitterness. Words like cover-up and denial replaced innovation and legacy. Executives projected calm, but cracks showed as lawyers clashed with engineers and culture turned defensive. On factory floors, pride eroded as distrust spread, leaving Ford fighting not just lawsuits, but the collapse of its very identity. And as that identity fractured, external forces were preparing to escalate the scandal even further, turning fallout into full-blown transformation. Policy whiplash. When the scandal reached Washington, hearings became inevitable. Lawmakers seized the moment, turning committee rooms into stages where furious owners, nervous executives, and sharp regulators collided under the glare of cameras. Senators demanded to know why Ford had allowed dangerous engines to remain on the road, and representatives waved maintenance records and complaint logs as if they were weapons. The spectacle was not just political theater, it was the beginning of a new era of oversight. Proposals surfaced quickly. Some lawmakers pushed for mandatory real-time defect reporting, requiring automakers to disclose issues to regulators the moment engineers flagged them. Others argued for expanded recall powers, giving the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration authority to impose immediate stop-sale orders without waiting for drawn-out negotiations. Even broader reforms appeared on the horizon, including harsher criminal penalties for executives who knowingly conceal safety defects. The sudden flurry of legislation created what analysts dubbed policy whiplash. Automakers scrambled to lobby against sweeping rules, warning of economic fallout. Consumer advocates, meanwhile, insisted that anything less than structural reform would only guarantee another tragedy in the future. Ford's scandal had turned into a catalyst, reshaping how Washington viewed automotive safety and corporate accountability. But while lawmakers debated reforms in grand halls, ordinary drivers were already creating their own version of oversight, grassroots vigilance born out of frustration and fear. The vigilant buyer. On the ground, the scandal awakened something deeper than political rhetoric. Ordinary consumers, burned by betrayal, began organizing in ways that would have seemed unthinkable a decade earlier. Social media platforms became rallying points where owners shared VIN numbers, repair invoices, and horror stories of breakdowns on highways. What began as scattered complaints quickly grew into a coordinated movement of watchdogs who refused to let the issue fade. Online forums dedicated to trucks turned into research libraries. Threads cataloged failures by year and mileage, while volunteer mechanics translated technical jargon into plain language for families trying to understand why their engines died. Activist groups formed with single, sharp missions: demand buybacks, extend warranties, and ensure transparency. Some created downloadable templates for filing federal complaints, while others produced guides to help owners confront dealerships armed with data. The shift was cultural as much as practical. Buyers stopped trusting glossy ads, instead checking recall histories, databases, and bulletins. Now every automaker faces vigilant consumers amplifying stories, pressuring regulators, and demanding accountability, an awakened collective voice that will not be silenced. As grassroots activism surged, Wall Street began to tally its own scorecard, and the numbers painted a devastating picture. The cost of cutting corners. Markets measure fear in dollars, and Ford's scandal triggered a sell-off that few on Wall Street had anticipated. Investors watched as class actions multiplied, regulatory probes expanded, and public trust evaporated. The company's stock price tumbled, erasing billions in market value within weeks. For pension funds, mutual funds, and individual shareholders, this was not just an inconvenience. It was wealth destruction on a massive scale. Credit agencies reacted quickly, downgrading Ford's outlook and warning of higher borrowing costs ahead. Analysts noted that the company would now spend far more on financing, precisely when it needed capital for electric vehicle development and quality reforms. For a business already operating in thin margin markets, that increase in debt pressure loomed like a storm cloud. The damage went beyond numbers on a spreadsheet. Confidence, once shaken, proved nearly impossible to restore. Investors compared Ford's handling of the crisis to past automotive disasters, drawing uncomfortable parallels. Market watchers began asking whether the company could afford both the legal settlements and the technological transformation demanded by the shift to electrification. Ford's reputation for engineering excellence, once a pillar of its stock appeal, was now a liability. Wall Street had its verdict. Cutting corners might save money in the short term, but the long-term cost could run into the billions, both in hard cash and in lost trust. Faced with collapsing markets, skeptical consumers, and relentless regulators, Ford stood at a crossroads, forced to choose between cosmetic gestures or meaningful reform. The only way out. For Ford, survival demands more than apologies. The company must rebuild trust piece by piece, even if that means sacrificing profits in the near term. Transparency is the first step. Full disclosure of the defects, production timelines, and internal warnings would signal a break from the culture of secrecy that fueled the crisis. Anything less will be read as spin. Buybacks and extended warranties form the next pillar. Owners must be reassured that they will not be left alone to shoulder catastrophic repair costs. A comprehensive buyback program, though expensive, could restore credibility faster than years of advertising. Extended coverage would ensure that failures occurring beyond the warranty window no longer destroy household budgets. Beyond consumer relief, Ford must embrace cultural reform inside its own walls. Engineers need a voice that cannot be silenced by accountants or lawyers. Safety must become a board-level priority, with independent oversight, ensuring that red flags never again disappear into filing cabinets. Finally, the company must look forward. Investments in next-generation technologies should be framed not as distractions, but as commitments to reliability, durability, and accountability. Ford cannot undo the past, but it can redefine its future. The only way out is through. By proving to drivers, regulators, investors, and employees that lessons have been learned and sacrifices will be made. Anything short of that risks turning one scandal into a permanent legacy of distrust. And as Ford charts its uncertain path forward, the question remains, will this moment mark the company's rebirth or its decline into history as another cautionary tale? The scandal may carry Ford's name, but the weight of it touches every driver, every family, and every community built on trust in the machines we rely upon daily. Engines can be replaced, but broken confidence leaves scars far deeper. This story isn't over, and the next chapter is already being written. Stay aware, stay loud, and never stop demanding accountability. Subscribe now, because the road ahead is filled with revelations you cannot afford to miss.